Welcome to the Hey Docs podcast with your host, Jill Allen. Today, I am welcoming back a returning guest who always brings the receipts, David Harris, CEO of Prosperident. As one of the leading voices in dental embezzlement, prevention, and investigation, David has helped thousands of doctors protect their practices from financial threats hiding in plain sight. In this episode, we're going beyond the horror stories and focusing on real, proactive strategies to keep your practice safe, from hiring protocols to financial oversight, and one very important kind of articulation that has nothing to do with your jaw. Let's dive in. This episode was brought to you by Gray Finch. Hey, docs. If you want to have a great business, the right practice management software is essential. But some can be slow, outdated, and lacking good support. That's why I recommend Gray Finch to all orthodontists. It's the fastest, most reliable, and most secure platform to grow your business and improve your efficiency. It's completely web-based, so you can run your entire practice anywhere and from any device with no servers, no downloads, or hidden fees. They even have the most helpful and responsive support team around. Right now, Gray Finch is giving a $500 discount to our listeners. Visit grayfinch.com/Jill Allen to learn more and see why it's one of the fastest growing providers in America. David, I am so excited to have you back on Hey Docs. Thanks for being here.
Oh, it is good to be back. I had so much fun last time, and I've been counting the days till we got to do this again.
I love that. Me too. It's always great when you get to have good conversations with good people and talk about things that you and I both love. So this is great. Now, what I have to say is, in the event that somebody didn't, I can't believe they would have, but didn't catch any of our last episode, would you mind just giving us a quick little history on who you are, a little bit about the company, and how you help orthodontic practices?
Sure. I have one of the coolest jobs in dentistry, I think. I'm the CEO of a dental-specific forensic accounting company called Prosperident. And what we do for orthodontists and the rest of dentistry is we chase and catch and put in jail those rotten people who steal from them.
Yeah. And that is what I love about talking with you, is getting to unpack what that means and how we catch those, unfortunately, those rotten people that end up in our practices every once in a while. Today, that just kind of takes me into what I wanted to talk about today. And I think it starts all the way back at hiring a lot of times. And I thought that this would be a really applicable episode because you and I both know in our industry, we've had just a lot of turnover. And if you're out there in the groups, we hear docs talking all the time about, oh, I've got a new employee. Oh, I've got to hire somebody new. Oh, my long-term employee has left. And so I thought, who better to talk to about this and maybe just helping us hedge our bets a little bit on not getting ourselves into a situation than you. So I'm wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about hiring, but from the lens of keeping us safe with hiring.
Yeah, most of the discussion around hiring is how to find the right person.
Mm-hmm.
And my perspective is a little bit reversed from that. What I want to talk to your docs about is how not to find the wrong person. And in a lot of orthodontic practices in particular, hiring is a delegated function. In other words, the orthodontist isn't the person doing the hiring, it's a staff member. But that doesn't change anything in terms of what is a good pre-employment screening. And the other thing I'll say, Jill, is that most practices do a terrible job of screening the people they're about to hire.
I would agree with you on that. So let's unpack that a little bit.
Absolutely. And that has a lot of consequences. It might just be the terminally lazy or the toxic employee, or it might be the one who steals from you.
Mm-hmm.
So what's involved in a pre-employment screening? Well, a pre-employment screening means I'm going to find out as much as I can about this employee before I welcome them into this very special place in my life called my practice.
Yeah.
And in particular, I'm going to try to find out what they really don't want me to know. So there's inherently a little bit of an adversarial relationship in pre-employment screening. You want to know some things, and there are probably some things that an applicant wants to tell you, and there are plenty of other things that they don't. So how do we get to those?
Yeah.
To me, there are a series of steps that you go through when you hire somebody, and the intent is to learn about them. One of the things that practices tend to skip over is what's called the criminal records check.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you check to see if this employee has some kind of criminal record that should concern you. And I'm going to give you a statistic that I don't want anybody in the audience to miss. 70 million, 70 million Americans have criminal records.
Wow. Let's just say that again.
70 million. And
70 million.
I'll bring it a little more down to earth. 1 in 4 adults in the United States has a criminal record.
Wow. Wow.
Now, to be clear, not every one of those criminal records would stop me from hiring somebody. If I'm talking to somebody who got busted for marijuana possession 20 years ago in a state where it's now legal,
yeah,
and that was their only transgression, I would look past that one in a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm.
But check fraud 2 years ago, or child molestation, or axe murdering, any of those things should be a non-negotiable showstopper when you're hiring somebody. Criminal record check is easy to do. I get asked a lot, is there some site I can go to online and find out if somebody has a criminal record? Maybe. But the online records are notoriously unreliable. The best way to do this is to go to a company that is in the business of background checking. To answer the question that some readers or some listeners probably wondering, no, my company does not do that. That's not something that Prosperident does. But there are plenty of companies out there that will do a thorough criminal record check. The problem is a criminal record can reside in a lot of places. For example, the state of Texas maintains its criminal records by county. And there are about 220 counties. So it's not enough to simply check the records where somebody lives right now. So if you're in Arkansas, checking the Arkansas court records isn't sufficient because somebody maybe used to live in California and they have a criminal record there. It's a little bit of a complex activity to scan and see if somebody actually has a record. Leave it to the professionals, and they don't charge a lot of money to do this.
Yeah.
But we're not done yet, because there are a lot more things that I want to look at before I hire somebody. The most important thing I want to do, other than criminal record check, is I want to talk to former employers. And whenever a dentist says to me, I always check references before I hire. The word references instantly tells me that they're barking up the wrong tree. I do not care in the slightest what somebody's parish priest or their high school basketball coach thinks about them. The only people I'm really interested in talking to are people who have supervised this person in an employment context. And my simple rule is I want to talk to everybody this person has worked for at least the past 5 years. Now, I'm going to give a tip that might not occur to every member of our audience today. A lot of applicants will give you a resume and they'll list the names of former employers and they'll put their phone numbers there. Don't ever call one of those phone numbers when you're looking for a reference.
Oh, good tip. Good tip.
Because you might end up talking to the applicant's uncle who has a disposable cell phone and is pretending to be their former employer. Okay.
Ooh, that's a good one. Yep.
Google is really cheap to use.
Yep.
If somebody gives a doctor's name and city, just go online, find the office number, call the office number, identify yourself, and ask to speak to the doctor. And then you're really talking to the former employer.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good one. I like that. That's really good.
Some other pre-employment screening things to do. It absolutely amazes me, Jill, that drug testing is not something that is routinely done when practices are hiring somebody.
Yeah, I don't think it's common in our industry. I know. Yeah. And I know for a lot of docs, myself even included, I'm like, I don't even know where you would go to do that.
The good news there is drug testing has gotten a lot easier in the past 3 or 4 years. Traditionally, drug testing was done through blood and urine samples, which meant that it had to happen at a lab. And if you live in a big city and there's a testing lab in your city, that's simple. If you have a rural practice and the nearest lab is 80 miles away, it's a whole lot more complicated. What's available now is saliva-based drug testing. And that changes everything because the practice owner can administer the drug test. The applicant can do it right in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
So the barriers to doing drug testing have come way down. And yet it's just not in the culture that we should know if that assistant we're about to hire is high or not.
Yep. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Did you have another tip for us?
In pre-employment screening, absolutely. One thing I always do before I hire somebody now is I take a look at their social networking activity. You can learn a lot about somebody by the way they communicate in social media. And there are a lot of warning signs that could be there. Sometimes you look at somebody's social media and you see kind of evidence of high-risk lifestyle. They're talking about how drunk they got Friday night and they're not sure how they got home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's somebody I probably don't want in my practice. One thing that always concerns me is really strongly expressed political or maybe religious beliefs. And I am not begrudging anybody the right to vote for who they want and believe what they want, but I don't want them bringing it into the office.
Oh, yeah, good to look at.
You know, if it's oozing out of their pores on social media and you hire this person, they're going to be doing it. I had to do it. I had to step in about 8 or 9 months ago because one of my team was engaging in a political discussion with one of our clients, and they were clearly on opposite sides of this issue. And I had to pull the team member aside and say, wait a minute, we don't do that here.
Yep.
It was a political discussion where both sides were pretty firmly entrenched and not in the same direction.
Sure.
And it didn't make us look good. And I think it gave the client some reason to question why they were dealing with us.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Wow. Ooh, nobody wants to find themselves in that situation.
So that's another thing. And then just bluntly, how people communicate in an unstructured environment gives you some idea of the way they're going to interface with your patients or referral sources or whoever they might have to talk to in their job.
Yeah.
And if they can't string a sentence together in social media, they're probably not going to be able to do it in your office either.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And when we're helping docs with hiring and whatnot, we're testing from how do you respond in an email response to a text response to how do they sound on the phone, all of those different things, because communication now in our practices it isn't just a phone call anymore.
No, it's everything. When we start from the place that the patients don't know how good a dentist or how good an orthodontist you are. I mean, they have no idea. If they knew, they probably wouldn't need you.
Yeah.
So that's not how they judge you. They judge you by the quality of you and your team's interactions with them.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got a question for you. I want to circle back around to two things that you said that you were highlighting. And my first goes all the way back to calling, we won't say references, but we will say former employers. And I'm wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about, from a doctor's perspective, if they are doing the calling or their office manager is doing the calling, what are the questions that maybe we should be asking besides, did they work for you? And is there some legal areas where we have to be careful what we can ask and what we cannot ask, but also knowing that we're coming at this from wanting to have a good hire, that we're especially thinking about it on this conversation about embezzlement and whatnot. Is there questions? Can you answer that? That's the first part. And then I'll come to my second part.
The questions you can't ask a former employer are the same questions you could not ask the employee directly. So we know that when we're hiring, there are certain criteria on which we cannot make a hiring decision. In other words, we cannot discriminate based on, for example, in most states, age between 18 and 64. And what that means is when you're talking to an applicant, you can't ask them how old they are. All you can ask them is, are you between the ages of 18 and 64? Similarly, you also can't ask the former employer to give them the applicant's birth date. Give you the applicant's birth date, because you couldn't ask that question to the employee, so you also can't ask it to a third party. So those are the things you can't ask a former employer. Outside of that, you can ask anything you want. You can ask what their salary was. You can ask whether they quit or they were fired. It doesn't mean they're going to answer these questions. But in terms of assessing somebody for suitability, you can ask anything you want. The one question, there are two questions that I want you to ask without fail. The first one is, I want you to ask the former employer to provide their dates of employment. The mistake I see a lot of people make, Jill, is they prompt the former employer. They say to the former employer, she says she worked for you from July of 2017 to September of 2024. And they're looking for confirmation. And when you ask that question, humans are lazy and they're just going to agree with you. What I'd rather ask the former employer is, can you please give me this person's start date with you and their last date they worked for you? And send them back to the personnel file and get the exact dates. Employees who are trying to hide something will often play with dates.
Yeah, sure.
And the way to catch misstated employment dates, which again means something deeper, is to ask the open-ended question. What was this person's first day with you and what was the last day? And compare that to what you were told on the applicant's resume or application form. The other question that you should always ask is very simple. Would you rehire this person?
Oh, that's a good one. And simple.
A lot of people believe wrongly that you cannot say anything negative about a former employee. That is categorically false. As long as what you say is truthful, you can say anything you want.
Interesting. And so that would be my second part to this. If one of my docs had somebody calling them and asking these questions, and because I've had a doctor that was in a situation where they knew that the employee was involved in an embezzlement and they were out looking for employment. And anyways, I'm just curious, what can you say if somebody were calling you to try and rehire the employee that you just had?
Assuming that is factual, and I'm going to choose my words here very carefully. Assuming that is factual, there is no legal prohibition against saying it. However, I don't think it would be a good idea. Here's what I would say instead if you called me looking for a job reference on that person. I would say, Dr. Allen, my attorney has instructed me to confirm that employee's dates of employment and only answer one other question. And that question is, would you rehire this person? So Dr. Allen will say to me, probably a little frustrated, okay, Dr. Harris, I'll play your game. Would you rehire that person? And I would say, not in 100 million years. And if I said that, Jill, and you hired them anyway, sometimes we just have to let Darwin do his work. Because I think I have sent you the most unambiguous of warnings. Is bad news. And as soon as I start with my attorney has instructed me, whatever's going to come out next can't be good.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Thank you for saying that, because again, I've had doctors in that situation, and that's a tough one to know what to ask. But then the flip side, if you've been in a situation where there is a problem, that's
as I say, there is no legal prohibition against saying something that is truthful. Doesn't always make it a good idea. And my approach would just be to say this person is absolutely categorically not eligible for rehire, and not elaborate beyond that. I think that's a way of sending a warning. You don't want to be sued over what you say. Even if you win the lawsuit, it takes your time, it costs you attorney fees. So the best thing to do is just talk about what you plan to do in the future.
Yeah.
And if you say, if that person were the last front desk person on the planet, I would not hire them. You're talking about what you plan to do in the future. There's nothing there that's factual or subject to a true or false test.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. So let's move this along. So we do all of our testing. We've asked our questions. We land on, okay, I think this employee will be a good hire for my practice, and I'm going to take the chance and bring them on. I want to talk, in your opinion, about when you bring that person on, and especially if it's somebody that's going into your financial area. I want to talk a little bit about just precautions that doctors should be thinking about putting in place so that they can build some safety around responsibilities and not give one person the keys to the kingdom, and literally the financial keys to the kingdom.
The biggest thing, the single biggest thing that somebody can do to lessen their risk of embezzlement is to divide duties among team members. And I hear that said a lot, and normally people aren't very specific about how to do it. And I'm going to get there in a minute. But let's talk about why we're dividing duties in the first place. What the goal we're trying to achieve is this. We want to make it so that if one of my team wakes up tomorrow morning and decides that they're going to steal from me, that they have to involve a coworker to do it. And that requirement will stop about 80% of would-be embezzlers in their tracks.
Yep.
Okay, the mere fact that they have to go to somebody else and say, I want to steal from our boss, but I need your help, not knowing how that person's going to respond, is a huge deterrent. So that's where we're trying to get. How do we get there? I have 3 rules for dividing up duties.
Let's hear them.
Let's start with discussing what's called the revenue cycle, which is the series of steps that have to happen to put money into a doctor's bank account.
Yep.
And when you think about those steps, in an orthodontic practice, the first step is the contract gets entered into practice management software.
Yep.
Then we have normally some kind of billing activity that goes on. If there's dental insurance involved, the dental insurance gets billed, the patient gets handed a contract and a monthly payment stream. The next thing that happens after the billing is payments come in. And then those payments get what Jill and I would call posted. If you haven't heard that word, it means recorded in practice management software. And then at the end of the day, there's an activity called balancing. And that's when the total that was collected today, according to practice management software, gets compared with what was actually there on hand to be deposited.
Yep.
And then finally, the bank deposit gets made. So the transactions, the initial transactions, the revenue side of the transaction gets entered. Patients and insurance companies get billed. They pay. The payments get posted. There's balancing at the end of the day, and then there's a deposit. 6 steps in the revenue cycle.
Yep.
I'm going to give you 3 rules for those. The first is that the entering of the initial transaction needs to be checked by the doctor.
Yep.
So when somebody enters a contract into your software, doctor needs to check that. If you have 300 patient starts a year, that's not a huge burden to check basically 1 contract per day. And was it entered at the right amount? Was the payment stream accurate? That needs to be checked. So that's a doctor task.
Yep.
You've got 5 things left: billing, payments, recording of those payments, balancing at the end of the day, and depositing. I have 2 rules for those. The 2 rules are nobody does more than 2 of those.
Yep. I love that.
And the 2 that somebody does are never sequential. In other words, whoever does balancing at the end of the day is not the same person who takes money to the bank. Okay. And what we want is a passage of funds and information there. So if I'm the person making the deposit, I'm going to get handed money from the person who did the balancing. I'm now responsible for it.
Yep.
So I'm going to want to know how much money should be in my hands. So I'm going to go back to the practice management software and look at the collections and make sure that the collections and deposits line up, or I'm not going to take the money to the bank, because if there's missing money, I'm going to wear it.
Yep.
So now I'm checking on the person doing the balancing. So that's what I mean about the 2 jobs that I do can't be sequential.
Yeah.
And I know what some of the audience are thinking right now. If you're in a big practice and you've got 5 administrative people, getting this kind of separation isn't terribly hard. What if you're in the classic small practice that has 1 administrative team member?
Yep.
Now, either the doctor or some of the clinical team have to get involved in some of the activities. An easy one, for example, is that if it's the job of one of your assistants to do the balancing at the end of the day, okay, now you've distributed that task. Something I'm always a fan of is the doctor getting the mail.
Yep.
And I don't mean that the mail comes into the front desk and somebody puts it on the doctor's desk. The doctor has a key to a post office box, and on the way to work or on the way home or whatever, stops in and picks up the mail.
Yep.
And is the first person to see it.
Yeah.
Again, that's receiving payments. That's an easy way to check that box off.
Yeah. And now a word from the sponsors who make this podcast possible. Are you thinking about opening an orthodontic practice? I know, it's a big decision, but saving 25% on the ADEC equipment you need to get started, that's an easy one. Because ADEC has a special program called Smart Start, designed to help you launch your first practice. You get up to 25% off your ADEC orthodontic equipment and furniture. You also get complimentary services to help you run and grow your business. And my favorite part, access to the Smart Start pricing for 2 whole years after you open your doors. That gives you flexibility to add more chairs as your cash flow grows. It's pretty smart. As an orthodontist, you care about getting all the little details right, and ADEC really got it right with this program. So if starting off with a big savings on ADEC equipment sounds good to you, the ADEC Smart Start is definitely worth a closer look. Just follow the link in the show notes to learn more. Hey docs, let's talk about Smile Suite, because it's not just another scheduling system. It's a game changer in the world of new patient management. And as a proud Smile Suite partner, I've witnessed the incredible impact it has on practices of all sizes. Smile Suite means your new patient calls and web leads are expertly handled 7 days a week, even during nights and weekends. And they offer top-notch customizable presentation software and seamless post-consultation follow-up. It's like having a secret weapon for your practice's success. Curious? Dive into the revolution at GetSmileSuite.com. And don't forget to mention Hey Docs to unlock some extra goodies. Elevate your practice with Smile Suite, because every smile deserves a suite of excellence. And I think I'd love to expand on that a little bit. I think what I'm seeing is so many of our practices is now we're moving into this digital format of collecting money. And so now we've got Delta Dental and all the insurance companies that are paying us electronically, or where we aren't physically receiving checks yet. And so there's the component of we've got money coming in and we're paying attention to that. It still has to be posted, as you're saying. There still has to be a checks and balances to confirm that things are going where they're supposed to be going. And the whole mail thing, some of my docs may be saying, I don't even have necessarily cash coming in, but there is still components of cash or different payments that come in. And we have to think about it in all the different ways that it comes in now, besides just a physical check into the office.
One of the things that I think hurts doctors in general is that they can visualize cash theft. They understand how that happens. But when it comes to stealing checks that come in, or credit card payments, or direct deposits, they can't quite see how somebody would do that. And all those things are not only possible, but relatively easy. And for those who can see this, I'm holding up a little gizmo called a square. And this is a little plastic thing that plugs into a smartphone and lets whoever has done that take credit card payments.
Yeah.
So if I'm a thief and I want to steal credit card payments from patients, or what are called virtual credit card payments from insurance companies, I get one of these squares. They cost like $9 at Amazon. And now I have a way of stealing credit card payments.
Yep. And I just want to say, to your point, docs, what we're talking about, this is not crazy. Just in the last 2 years, I've had a practice that had an employee at their front desk that had one of these, and they would come in and they would post the payment into the operating system and then reverse that payment out, and they'd be running it through their own system. And nobody was checking that end of day. Nobody was checking to go, hey, I don't see those credit card payments in my terminal. I never saw those credit card payments hit my bank account. And gosh, it just went unnoticed for a while. It eventually got picked up. But I guess what I would say is the intent, if the intent is there, it's easy. And if we don't have pieces in place, like David is saying, for us to monitor these things, as hard as it is to be like, oh my gosh, it's just one more thing on my plate, we're really leaving ourselves wide open to easy theft, but with just a little intent.
To pick up on what you said about the bulk of payments migrating to an electronic delivery, I get asked a lot, does that make it easier or harder for somebody to steal? And my answer is way easier. It's a lot harder for somebody to steal a physical payment, whether it's cash or a check, than it is to divert an electronic payment. And the reason is really simple. In most practices, your staff, quite properly, don't have access to your bank account. Mm-hmm. So if a physical payment comes in, if a check comes in, normally the check and the EOB are on the same piece of paper, and you separate them, and the EOB is used to post the payment in your practice management software, and then the check goes into the deposit. It all happens simultaneously. With an electronic payment, what your front desk staff see is an EOB, the explanation of benefits, and the payment, everybody assumes, has just gone into our bank account.
Yep.
But the staff typically, if they don't have access to your bank account, can't tell whether that payment actually went in or not. And we've seen a number of cases where either a thief redirected electronic funds transfers to their own bank account, or in one case that I saw, there were two doctors with the same last name, and the insurance company was paying the other one. But because your staff are posting blind, in other words, they're posting from the EOB and just taking it on faith, that money goes into your bank account. If for whatever reason that money's been redirected, probably nobody will notice it for a long time.
Yeah.
One thing that I've seen some practices do, and I am in favor of this, is they have a separate bank account that is only used for electronic funds transfers. So electronic funds transfers go into that account, and then once a month it gets swept to your main bank account. And then you give the payments, the staff processing payments, read-only access to that bank account.
Yeah.
In other words, they can't move money, but they can see whether deposits have gone in or not. And now you're not posting blind anymore. Now they can line up the explanation of benefits with the money actually going into the account. And they don't get to see how much money you have in your main bank account, or how much salary you pay your spouse, or anything like that. They just get to see the money coming into this special purpose account. So that's one way I've found that it's a little bit less of a situation where somebody's just taking it on blind faith that money that the EOB says is paid actually hit your bank account.
Yeah. Yeah. And so let's expand on that a little bit, because that leads me into the next issue. And you touched on it for just a minute. You and I are both in agreement. Employees should not, docs, I want you to hear me. Employees should not have access to your bank accounts. It's one thing if they've got a read-only access, but I think you really have to be careful even about that. And I love your idea of a separate bank account for just those deposit accounts coming in that an employee can only see. But if you're like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. All right, just be careful about, I see a lot of docs that are like, oh, they're my best employee. I won't have any problems giving them access to my bank account. And I would say, warning, Will Rogers, that is a bad idea. Don't do that.
And the word I have for those people, Jill, is future Prosperident clients.
Unfortunately, probably. I want you to just talk a little bit about that. We were starting to unpack it a little bit. I think this is something I go over all the time with my docs, but it's hard, especially with my startups, because we just haven't seen the volume build up yet. And it's easy in the beginning when I'm telling my docs, hey, you have to reconcile your practice management account. And then you have to reconcile that to the deposits that come into your bank account. And you have to look for discrepancies. And then your accountant or bookkeeper, or whoever is now, they're going to reconcile your business banking account to your expenses. But the CPA or the business bookkeeper are not looking into your practice management software. And we have this big void, I think, out there where a lot of times our CPAs and bookkeepers don't even know that they should be looking at something else. Our docs are too busy to pay attention to the deposits coming in, and then the reconciliation compartment on the practice management side to be like, that's weird. Something was posted as cash and then changed to a credit card, and then I never checked to see if that money actually came in as a credit card. And there's, again, so many ways that fraud can happen. Can you talk a little bit about this, I call it trust but verify component that we really should be thinking about when it comes to this? And I know we could do probably a whole training lecture on this, and it's hard to break this down in 40 minutes, but can you give us a top level of what docs need to be paying attention to here?
There are two components to keeping financial control over your practice. The first one is to make sure that, as you said, that collections according to your practice management software line up with deposits at your bank. If you're a practice owner and you don't do that, which is a lot of practice owners,
Yes.
you have made it so that the dumbest, laziest thief on the planet can successfully take your money.
And it's not
Okay?
cash, guys. It's not just cash that we're
It's
talking
not just
about.
cash. If I can record payments in your software, which I want to do, when money comes in, one alternative, if I'm stealing it, is just to put it in my pocket, not record anything in your software. However, the consequence if I do that is that patients are going to progress through their treatment and they're going to get to debonding and they're going to owe more money than they should. And the patients will get confronted about that, or their parents will, and they'll argue long and hard that they've paid what they're supposed to and they don't owe anything. So if I'm a thief, that will get me caught.
Yeah.
What I want to do is I want to keep patient account balances accurate. So if I enter money into your practice management software and then I don't deposit it, that creates a discrepancy between collections according to the software and what goes into your bank. You or somebody not involved in your practice, like your bookkeeper, your CPA, needs to check that. It's a mathematical exercise. The conventional way to do this, the conventional wisdom was you check this every day. My suggestion would be, instead of that, let's do it monthly.
Yep.
And the reason for that, Jill, is there are a lot of transactions, and electronic ones are the culprits here, where the transaction is recorded on a different day in your practice management software from when it hits your bank. So, for example, if somebody pays, let's say it's a paid in full patient, they pay $6,000 today by credit card. Your practice management software will treat that as a payment today, but that money might not hit your bank account for 2 or 3 days. Yep. So if you're trying to line up collections versus deposits daily, those time differences will drive you crazy. Instead, what I'd suggest is doing it monthly. And when you do it monthly, most of those timing things self-resolve. So if somebody pays by credit card on the 5th of the month and the money hits your bank account on the 8th, when you look at the month as a whole, that's not a discrepancy. Yep. And all you're really dealing with in discrepancies are transactions that overhang the first day of the month or the last day of the month, which is a much smaller problem. So step one is you have to do that. The assumption you're making when you do that test is that what the practice management software is telling you was collected is the same number as what patients paid the practice. So the second thing you need to do, and Jill said this a minute ago, and I'm really just rephrasing it in a slightly different way, is you have to ensure the integrity of entries into your practice management software.
Yes.
And I mentioned already that you must check contracts when they get entered. That's a simple one. The other one, though, is the transactions that get entered in daily. And the problem, especially in an orthodontic practice, is when you look at that day-end report for the practice, it's huge. Yep. Because you might have had 50 or 80 patients in today for ortho checks. They're in having adjustments. It's not a financial transaction. In orthodontics, the financial transactions happen with monthly payments, not with patients actually showing up in the practice. Yep. And I've seen doctors who show me this report and they say, it's 7 pages. You really expect me to look at this every day? And I guess I could say yes. I will say there's an easier way to do it. When your software prints an end of day report for you, it can filter out the non-financial transactions. So we can take all the adjustment visits off the report for this purpose and look only at the financial stuff, which is payments and adjustments and new charges. Yep. And that's what I want you to look at.
Yep. Me too.
And that's probably no more than 2 pages in a typical ortho practice. So again, rather than looking at the long list of patients who came in today and picked up a new set of aligners or had an adjustment, which again are completely non-financial transactions, let's just look at the money stuff. Yeah. And Jill mentioned you see a payment that's deleted and re-entered in a different format, or you see an amount that's changed. Those are cause for concern. Mm-hmm. So let's get the reporting you're looking at down to what's really relevant for this purpose, and then look at it carefully and see what doesn't make sense to you.
Yeah, that's again, it's like these are the devil's in the details, right? And taking it all the way back to hiring the right employee and looking out for red flags in the beginning. I think it just is so easy. And I see this all the time where docs get comfortable with an employee, trust. They just like, but they're a good person, but they're so nice, but they're so willing
But
to
they go to
work.
church every Sunday, you
Yeah,
know.
exactly. And they're so willing to stay after when I'm not here and work on the books and all these things. And I just think we just have to have such safeguards in place. And I believe as our technology moves forward, it's even more important now, doctors of 2025 and going forward, we have got to be more diligent than ever because there are even more easier ways for fraud and embezzlement to happen in our practices. And I think, especially when we're a busy practice, this is not where everybody wants to put their eyes on. We care about our money in our bank account, but the details of, am I really looking to see if a $300 payment hit my bank account or not?
Where?
Yeah, exactly. 12 of those a month
Yep.
that don't hit your bank account, or 24 of those, or you know what I mean? It's not going to be blatant. It's crafted, and if you aren't paying attention to that, team members know it, and that's how it happens.
Yeah. And this daily review of financial information is not delegatable. Your CPA
Mm-hmm.
can't do that for you.
Yeah, yeah,
That has to be you. The lining up of collections versus deposits, that's mechanical.
yeah.
But the review of transactions requires an application of logic and judgment and some awareness of what happened in your practice today. So that has to be you.
Yeah, yeah. I know we can just keep going and going here. Is there anything else that, as we are wrapping this up a little bit, I know we've talked about a lot, and I love that we were able to unpack both sides of the what we need to be paying attention to. If you were to say, "Hey, docs, I think we really need to talk about this other thing that we have not talked about or whatnot," do you have any thoughts for us in that kind of tie into everything?
Yeah, I'll throw out a couple of other ones. The first one is that um, what I tell every doctor is that the financial reports that you rely on should be ones that you printed yourself. So do not let anybody, when I talk about this day end review, print the report yourself. And if you don't know how to do that, there's somebody in your life who can show you how. Print the report yourself and review that report. As soon as you allow somebody else to print a report and hand it to you, you've opened the door to selective reporting, where they're curating what in the practice management software, which is
Mm-hmm.
really easy to do. So print your own reports. The second thing is, when you see discrepancies, when something doesn't look right, the traditional response of doctors is to go to a staff member and ask them. And the problem with that is there's a knowledge gap. There are certain things that they know a whole lot more about than you do. And when you ask a question and they're trying to hide something, they will give you an explanation that sounds plausible and makes you shrug your shoulders and walk away. The mentality I'd like you to have is, when you see a discrepancy, you need to go back to documents.
Yeah.
So if you see something that doesn't look right, I want you to ask somebody, but not ask them the answer, ask them to produce the document. So you're looking at an insurance payment and it doesn't look right to you. What I want you to do is ask the person for the explanation of benefits. Or
That's great.
you're looking at a contract and the pricing doesn't look right because you never charge $5,000 for aligners, and here's a $5,000 case. Find the contract.
Yeah.
Can contracts be altered, or can the wrong numbers be entered into your software? Absolutely, they can. But let's start by looking at that document.
Yeah. I think that's great. And I'll just add on to that again, just going back to adjustments. If you are looking at your reports, your day end reports, and you're seeing an adjustment that doesn't, I always say, if it has to do with money and there's an adjustment, question it, look into it. Can I see that? Can I get into my terminal and see that payment that was posted incorrectly actually shows up somewhere else? If I can find it, then I don't need to ask the question. But if I can't, that's where you start digging a little deeper, or start looking for other adjustments that look similar and trying to get, is there a pattern that's evolving?
I'll mention one last thing that I encourage doctors to do. and it's called articulation. And I'm very conscious that when I talk about articulation to this group,
It's not
you know,
bite. It's not about the
they're
bite.
they're picturing that. Same principle, but we're applying it financially. And articulation is essentially the concept that two disparate things should fit together nicely.
Mm-hmm.
When I talk about financial articulation, here's how it works. Let's say, Jill, that your practice was open 15 days last month. And now at the end of the month, you're comparing what was collected to what was deposited. There's one intermediate step to do. And the intermediate step is this. I take my 15 end of day reports. These are the ones that I printed myself and I looked at and then stuck aside because I'm going to need them at the end of the month. I take those and I add up three numbers on them, which are the fees, the adjustments, and the payments. So I get totals for each of those three. And then I compare those totals to a month-end printout from my practice management software. And they should articulate exactly. If there's a discrepancy between those two, in other words, if my 15 end of day reports don't add up exactly to my month end report, what that means is that somebody came in after hours and they entered stuff into my software that they did not want me to see. So this is a way of stopping people from doing an after hours end run around your scrutiny.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
And once that's done, now the month end report has integrity, and that's what you or your CPA can use to compare collections against deposits.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Yeah, that's great. That's really good. And so I really like the idea of thinking about it from the word that we all know, articulation, but thinking about it from a financial articulation versus a bite. That's great. I know that you and I could just keep going and going here, and which is why I love having you on. And we always have such good conversations. If somebody wants to connect with you, if they want to just talk to you about maybe they think there may be something going on, or they may be, I don't know, noticing a pattern that doesn't seem right, or maybe they just want to find out more about you guys and how you might be able to help them. What's going to be the best way for them to get in touch with you? Best way to get in touch?
Absolutely. And we do both things. We help practice owners investigate possible or confirmed embezzlement.
Mm-hmm.
And we also proactively help them put the systems in place that will protect them. So whether you feel like you're at risk or you don't and you want to keep it that way, we can help. The best way to reach us is through our website, which is just www.prosperident.com.
Mm-hmm.
And if you come close enough and you get it a little bit wrong, Google will probably come to your rescue. But prosperident.com is our website. Or you can always call our toll-free number, which is 888-398-2327.
Perfect.
If you go through our website, there's a contact us form. And if you fill it in, you'll get a response with a booking link. And you can just book a time to speak to one of our team right from that link. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Again, I just so appreciate your knowledge in this field and what you do for us. I know you guys have caught a lot of things over the years and helped a lot of docs out of unfortunate sticky spots. But I think it's just great to know you guys are out there and being our expert advisors in this area. So thank you so much for being on Hey Docs today with us.
A pleasure, Jill.
Yes. All right. You know how I like to finish up Hey Docs? I like to finish with a little speed round. So are you ready for a few questions to finish us up?
Oh, this part makes me so nervous.
It'll be easy. It'll be easy. What is one business trend you think more people should be paying attention to?
I think it's the economic squeezing of the dental profession, which is happening right now. And it's very vivid in orthodontics because the amount that insurance pays really hasn't moved since about 1970. There was a time when dental insurance would cover most of an orthodontic treatment, and now it's a drop in the bucket in most cases.
Yep.
So that's not moving. And I think our patients are feeling inflationary pressures right now. And while that's going on, practices are getting hammered with their own inflation. Staff wages have never really settled back down since COVID.
Yep.
And now a lot of the stuff that a dental practice buys and uses is manufactured overseas, and there's some kind of tariff being applied to it.
Yep.
This is, in my mind, not a great time financially to be a practice owner.
Yeah. 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 I think it's important to be paying attention to for sure. How about another one? What is the most unexpected lesson you've learned in your career so far?
Most unexpected. I get to see sometimes people do truly wonderful altruistic things, and I also get to see other people do incredibly despicable things, and sometimes those two happen in the same hour. I've really learned how high people can soar and how truly evil they can be.
Yeah. Yeah. Ugh. All right. And then the final one, if you had an unlimited resource, just unlimited resources, what's one big idea you'd want to bring to life?
That we could live on Mars?
There we go. I love it.
Gosh, unlimited resources. I would love to solve the energy crisis. I would like to
Mm,
make it so that humans could live sustainably on our planet, because I'm not sure that's what we're doing now, and I think our kids or our grandkids are going to pay the price for that.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again. This has been great. Thanks for the last little bit of insight, and I cannot wait to have you on again.
I would love to do it.
Thanks.